Hello, everyone. Pastor David here. Hope you're doing great. Do you guys know what this is? That's right, it's a life preserver. Now, do you know what a life preserver is used for? Now, a life preserver is used to save somebody who is drowning. So a life preserver is something someone can hold on to keep them floating. A life preserver is something used to save someone's life. Now today, we're going to talk about how God is our rescuer. So last week, we learned about King Josiah. Now today in God's big story, 20 years later, the Babylonians have taken over Jerusalem. Many of the Israelites were taken as slaves and prisoners. Now that's kind of sad to have to leave your own country. Now, how would you feel if you were forced to leave and become a slave? At that time, the king of Babylon was Nebuchadnezzar. Everybody say Nebuchadnezzar. Say it again. One more time. There were 4 men chosen to serve Nebuchadnezzar. Their names were Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel and his 3 friends were given Babylonian names. They were taught to speak Babylonian and trained in Babylonian culture and religion. Kind of like how you study math, science, and history in school. Now they were even tested on it. Now it must have been hard for these 4 gentlemen to be forced into Babylonian culture because they didn't want to disobey God and His laws. Now we've talked about God's laws in the big God story. So who can tell me the name or another name for God's laws? Now these 4 gentlemen obeyed God's laws, which are also known as the 10 Commandments. They especially didn't want to break the first commandment, which was to worship false gods. This is how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego worshiped God. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar was a very prideful king. He desired that all people worship him over every other god. One day, he had a huge gold statue made in his honor. So the statue was about 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. That's taller than a 90-foot building. And when it was set in place, King Nebuchadnezzar said, "Whenever you hear the music play, the special music, you are to bow down in front of this gold statue." I have a question for you. Do you think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were going to bow down and worship this idol? You're right, they were not. They were not going to disobey the one true God, which meant that they were going to honor God and disobey the king. King Nebuchadnezzar and the people were not going to be very happy when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego decided not to bow down. The king told Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that if they heard the music and they did not bow down, they would be thrown into the fiery furnace. So King Nebuchadnezzar thought that this was gonna fix it. He thought that they would bow because he asked them, "Well, if we throw you in the furnace, what God will save you from my hands?" Now, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had a choice to make. They could either choose to serve the one true God or worship this idol. What do you think they did? Well, this is what they said to the king. They said, "Even if you throw us into the fiery furnace, we believe that the God that we serve will deliver us." But they also said, "Even if he doesn't, we will never bow down to the gold statue that you've created." Now that is amazing faith. They said they would not serve any other God other than the one true God, even if it meant dying. King Nebuchadnezzar was so angry that he ordered for the furnace to be extra hot, so when the men walked in, they would be burned to death immediately. He even ordered his strongest soldiers to tie Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with rope and thrown in the furnace. The furnace was most likely used to heat metal and gold. It was also fairly large, with large openings so that you could see into it to see the brick and the metal being made. King Nebuchadnezzar said, "Weren't there 3 men that we threw into the fiery furnace? I see 4 men walking around unbound and untied, and the 4th one looks like the son of the gods." Did you just hear what the king said? He said he saw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walking around in the furnace. And he also saw a 4th person walking with them. This means that God not only rescued them from this fire, he sent a heavenly protector to be in the fire with them. You see, God rescued them from the fire that day. So King Nebuchadnezzar said, "Come out of there." Do you remember when the fires hit San Diego about 3 years ago? What do things look like after they've been burned? What do they smell like? Why don't you discuss this with your neighbor? I'm going to give you a few seconds. You would have thought that after Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in the furnace, they would be burned, but they weren't. They didn't even smell like smoke. The Bible says that when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked out of the furnace, not even a hair on their head was burned. The only thing that was burned were the ropes that the soldiers tied them up in. The Bible also says that Nebuchadnezzar was amazed at what he had seen, and he said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent an angel to protect them." They trusted in God, and they defied King Nebuchadnezzar's command to worship any other god, even if it cost them their lives. But they did this because they worshiped the one true God. God rescued Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, his faithful servants. And he continues to rescue his faithful servants even today. Through faith in his Son, Jesus Christ, God rescues us from the death of sin into a life with him. We might not be thrown into the furnace like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but we still need God to rescue us from situations that we face today.